Reinforcements. Cadian High Command would eventually receive word that the fleets of the Iron Knights and Imperial Fist chapters of the Adeptus Astartes had established contact. Lord Castellan Creed was also in conference with the Great Wolf Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolf chapter, planning how best the Space Marines might be deployed. Though the Cadian Sector High Command held no authority over the Adeptus Astartes, Creed had indicated his support for Grimnar should he establish himself as the nominal head of the Space Marine chapters operating in the region. Captain Echion of the Patriarchs of Ulix, commander of the Ultramarines Honor Company, a specialized company of the Ultramarines that had been stationed at the Cadian Gate for many millennia, rotating officers and warriors from Ultramarine companies elsewhere, and also drawing from Ultramarine successor chapters, also voiced his support for this arrangement. Lastly, the Cadian High Command also received word from the Adeptus Mechanicus Temple at Kaskar Galan that the Order Reductor, consisting of an ancient and venerated siege engines akin to the dreadnoughts of the Astartes, was to reinforce the Cadian defenses there. More bad news. Unfortunately, not all the news that reached the Cadian High Command at this time was good. The situation on the world of Leitar had taken a drastic turn for the worse. In an attempt to bring to ground the heretic calling himself the voice of the Emperor, the Legio Ignatum of the Collegia Titanica, the Death Spectres Space Marine chapter, and the Yoran Dragoons Imperial Guard Regiment lay siege to that world's capital city. Soon after the arrival of these forces a large portion of Leitar's native defense forces and populace rebelled and took up arms against their government, slaughtering the planetary governor and his staff in an orgy of bloodletting. The Leitar security forces and the Adeptus Arbites reacted with commendable speed, breaking up suspected chaos cults and anti-imperial organizations. But once again, Leitar was plunged into anarchy. It concerned the Cadian High Command greatly that they were still able to control Leitar, even with the presence of a Titan Legion and a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes on the world. The rebels continued their actions, and the voice of the Emperor continued broadcasting his lies across the region. Many within Cadian High Command continued to labor on an analysis of the Traitor Legion's attacks. This task was ordered directly by the Lord Castellan, and had brought about a degree of conflict within the High Command. For Supreme Grand Master Azrael of the Dark Angels chapter heard of this endeavor and ordered it to cease, stating that the actions of the traitors were the business of the Astartes themselves, and were of no concern to the mortal units. Creed rejected this assertion as patently ridiculous under the circumstances of the current crisis, and Logan Grimnar agreed with him. As a result, Azrael soon withdrew with the cooperation of the Dark Angels. Azrael soon withdrew what cooperation the Dark Angels had been prepared to offer. Well, that's kind of bad. Chaos Vanguard. Multiple incidents of new Chaos incursions continue to be logged within the Cadian High Command, the greatest number of which involved the Night Lord's Traitor Legion. Imperial analysts had reached the conclusion that this legion had been employed in a vanguard role throughout the early stages of the Chaos invasion, and had been extremely effective in its mission. The Night Lords were notorious for the savagery of their assaults, as their predilection for inflicting wanton cruelty on all they encountered was well known across the Imperium. The archenemy was believed to have utilized the Night Lords in this role in order to foment panic in Imperial civilian populations as a result of the brutality of these attacks. The people of many worlds were consumed by panic, and their planet would be next. The people of many worlds were consumed by panic that their planet would be next to suffer at the hands of the Night Lords. While the Night Lords had been deployed to serve as terror troops, the insidious traitor Astartes of the Alpha Legion were employed by Abbadon as infiltrators. This particular force was one that the officers of the Cadian High Command had been briefed on by the Ordo Malus, who had considered their activity of dire import. It says import, not importance, so I don't know. Reports of scattered enemy attacks upon key imperial facilities have been continuously received by the Cadian High Command, but these minor attacks had seemed to pale in significance when compared to the overall scale of the Chaos invasion. However, closer analysis along with the information received from the Inquisition led the imperial forces to believe that these attacks actually represented the work of the Alpha Legion. Further investigations revealed that a number of rear echelon supply and communication facilities were amongst the targets hit. One could not help but wonder whether these objectives were designed to hinder the movement of imperial reinforcements into the region from further afield. The Emperor's children, led by the immortal favored Chaos champion of Slaanesh, Lucius the Eternal, feasted well upon the agony of the population of the world of Belisar. The plague marines of the Death Guards stalked across the battlefields of the planet Amistel. The ground beneath their fleet cuttered with the unquiet corpses of those who the plague of unbelief had consumed. In the wake of these traitor legions comes the horde of the lost and the damned. Traitor guard, mutants, chaos cultists, and human fiends of the very worst aspects who despoil the domain of mankind by their very presence. The acts of wanton destruction and desecration they proceeded to carry out in the name of the ruinous powers shook even the most stoic defenders of the imperium to the core. War in the void. While the war continued to go badly upon the surface of many worlds in the Cadian system, in particular St. Josemain's Hope and Solar Mariatus, the war in space was fought more on the Imperium's terms. The Cadian system had been the focus of Abbadon's primary fleet actions, and the Imperium's fortunes there changed from day to day. The situation was highly fluid, and the chaotic naval forces found themselves stretched to exploit the victories they had won. Although the Imperial Navy's fleets could not hope to oppose those of the arch-enemy in and around the orbital space of most of the worlds of the Cadian system, they continued to hold on to control of the inter-system space lanes within the Cadian sector. The Imperium could not under any circumstances afford to let their guard waver, for it was upon one of these routes that they hoped to bring the planet killer to battle. To let it pass was too terrible a failure to contemplate. A fleet the size of which had not been seen since the end of the Gothic War 8 standard centuries earlier had been dispatched from Cypher Mundi, and arrived at Bellis Corona, in preparation for a massive imperial counter-offensive into the Cadian Gate. The arrival of this vast armada allowed those imperial vessels that had been fighting continuously since the beginning of the invasion a brief respite. Severely depleted ships' companies were bolstered through indiscriminate press ganging, and hasty repairs and refits were undertaken on those vessels most in need of them. The Imperial reinforcements were split into battle groups, each tasked with bolstering the defenses in a specific sector of the Segmentum Obscurus. The regions around the Eye of Terror encompass many millions of cubic light years, and only by the concentrated application of resources in those areas in most desperate need could the Imperial Navy hope to make inroads and stall, and eventually repel the Chaos war fleets plaguing the region. During the later stages of the campaign, when Abbadon's fleet was seen approaching the agri-world of Lortox, the Ultramarines Honor Company distinguished itself with bold, spaceborne counter-assaults against Abbadon's fleet as the planet killer closed with that imperial world on the outskirts of the Agrippina sector. The action bought Lorthrak's planetary defense forces time to evacuate a significant portion of the population before the world was destroyed by Abbadon's horrific weapon of planetary destruction. The Ultramarine Honor Company managed to succeed in crippling the planet killer, but the massive vessel still had enough power to limp away. In the aftermath of the Lorthok's evacuations, the Ultramarines Honor Company redeployed to Cadia and the surrounding star systems, launching a series of operations to hinder Abbadon's forces as they assaulted the Imperial positions. These attacks included a series of highly successful boarding actions against the lumbering space hulks, being used to transport vast hordes of the arch-enemy's troops to reinforce Abbadon's siege of Cadia. It was a fool's dream to hope the planet killer could be found before it was brought to bear upon the Imperial forces. Without warning, it appeared in orbit over the world of Cadia. Though many could scarcely believe it, the world was destroyed by the massive vessel. It was lost, and with it, millions of loyal and faithful subjects of the Emperor, dead at the hands of the despoiler and his despicable weapon. Utter dread now descended upon the Segmentum Obscurus High Command. Despite the success of the early solar weeks of the invasion, many had come to believe that this war might not be won in the short term. Where at first the Imperial forces fought to repulse Abbadon's assault, to deny him footholds upon Imperial worlds, they now fought to keep him from overwhelming them entirely. This was a grim paradigm, and one the Imperial forces were not ready to accept. They believed Abbadon dare not destroy Cadia, as its pylons were reckoned intrinsic to the continuous stability of the Cadian Gate, which he needed to move his forces deeper into Imperial space so that he could launch an assault upon Terra. So the Imperium would make its last stand upon Cadia and hold that world no matter the cost. Enemy of my enemy. With every world in the Sector Oculus, sector surrounding the Eye of Terror, now embroiled in a war that had already claimed countless billions of lives, a new, unexpected faction suddenly took a hand in events. The ever-elusive ships of the Eldar had been sighted by the crews of many Imperial Navy vessels, and by troopers on the ground across at least a dozen sectors. In the depths of interstellar space, these Xenos warships reportedly intervened in battles between the Imperial Navy and the Chaos Invaders, on occasion providing aid to the Imperial warships and allowing them time to escape when overwhelmed, but at other times attacking them without provocation. The Dark Eldar had also been sighted, preying on the lesser worlds of the Cadian sector. They had even taken slaves on the feral world of Medusa, the homeworld of the Iron Hands chapter. It was rumored that a legendary Eldar faction referred to by the Ordox Xenos as Harlequins had been sighted on the battlefields of Agrippina and Schelus. The Eldar had also been sighted upon the world of the Cadian Gate. Cadian High Command had long been aware of the Eldar of the Ultwi craft world maintained a strong presence in the vicinity of the Eye of Terror. Though little was known of their ways, it was widely believed that they ultimately worked towards the downfall of the arch-enemy. Indeed, the Black Guardians of Ulti had taken a hand in a number of battles, appearing unexpectedly and without any warning upon the surface of planets thought distant from the Eldar activity. Upon Belisa Corona, Eldar strike forces had freed Imperial Navy ground crews from the Chaos Legions closing in on them. However, there were also reports from the Cadian system of the Eldar falling upon themselves in fits of madness from the Agrippina sector, of the Eldar attacking the warriors of the Ultramarines Honor Company, and that their ghost ships harbored fiendish beasts of the warp. As ever with these mercurial Xenos, their motivations proved as alien as they were unpredictable. An ancient foe. The Ordo Xenos also informed the Cadian High Command of yet another threat from an unexpected quarter. The return of the ancient and implacable Xenos known as the Necrons, who had been found to be active in the Sentinel worlds. These soulless automatons were suspected to have lain dormant in some manner upon the Sentinel worlds for many Terran years, perhaps for millennia. Though they had slumbered right underneath the Imperium's noses, somehow they had awoken, most likely in reaction to the activities of Abbadon and the forces of chaos. In some manner, the Necrons were known to be the very antithesis of the warp, steered into activity by its waxing power. The Necrons' nature compelled them to oppose the warp in all its forms, and for all intents and purposes, this adversarial posture could be considered in human terms and other loathing for chaos. Chaos represented the greatest peril for the Imperium, yet mankind paradoxically relied on the warp for interstellar travel, communication, and much more. The Necrons, however, received no such benefit from the warp. They had no psychers to draw upon the imperium, and while their highly advanced technology provided them with power over the material universe that rivaled the abilities of the strongest psychers. In practical terms, this meant that the Imperium could expect the newly awakened Xenos to oppose the forces of chaos. However, this did not mean that the Imperial forces could or should treat them as allies, even in the loosest sense, for this ancient race was anathema to humanity. They were death incarnate to the entire species, who the Necron lords viewed as primitive interlopers within the rightful territory of their ancient empire. Lord Castellan Creed immediately enacted orders for all Imperial forces to stay clear of this Xenos race and to allow them to engage the forces of chaos wherever and whenever it was their intention to do so. However, the Imperial forces were not, under any circumstances, to render aid to these Xenos, for to do so would be the ultimate harm of mankind. The Imperium would not tolerate the Xenos, the Necrons' presence in Imperial space only so long as Expedus dictated. These ancient undying Xenos might be the enemy of humanity's enemy, but that did not make them the Imperium's friend. And trust me, it gets better from here. For the greater good, space commies, yay! With the Imperium committing more and more resources towards the defense of the Cadian Gate after 997 of the 997 year of the 41st millennium, reports from the eastern fringe of the Ultima Segmentum suggested the Tau Empire was using this time when the Imperium's eyes were elsewhere to strengthen its defenses and even enlarge in its own domain in what the Tau called the Third Sphere Expansion. Though the Xenos had yet to threaten the Imperial worlds at this time and were largely expanding into uncontested wilderness space, Imperial strategos keep one wary eye on the Tau Empire, lest they use this time of conflict and uncertainty for their own advantage, to the eternal cost of the Imperium. The Imperium commanders were right to be worried. In the 99th year of the 31st millennia, the Tau initiated a major military campaign to seize Imperial territory in the eastern fringe that would coincide with the 13th Black Crusade and become known as the Zeiss Campaign. As the Imperium's military was heavily involved with preventing the breakout of the forces of chaos from the Cadian Gate on the other side of Imperial space, the Tau took advantage of this distraction to rapidly expand their territory. The Imperium responded with this dispatch of several units drawn from the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes to the Zeiss sector to blunt the Tau's offensive. With the victory of the Astartes in destroying the last major Tau forward logistical base in the sector at the world of Augura, the Zeiss campaign marked the end of the Third Sphere expansion, with the Tau Empire having grown to 133% of its prior size. Unfortunately for the Imperium, though the Space Marines had won the war and stopped the Tau's seizure of human territory, it was not possible to sanction a retaliation thrust into Tau-held space, as the individual Space Marine forces were required elsewhere in the galaxy to hold the line against the forces of chaos during the height of the 13th Black Crusade. Enemies everywhere. You would expect that. The Cadian High Command was also briefed by the Orthodox Xenos on a number of other factions which assailed mankind as the forces of chaos battered at the doors of the Cadian Gate. The eldars were once again active in and around the Sector Oculus. Inquisitorial forces attempted to ascertain their intentions, for their actions appeared contrary and mercurial, one moment actively aiding the Imperial forces, the next slaughtering them. The Cadian High Command held no illusion that the Eldar fought for anyone other than themselves, and proceeded to plan accordingly. The orks appeared to be increasingly active in the Scarus sector. The Xenos believed the greenskins there had been building up for an invasion for some time, lurking in the unexplored depths of the wilderness space and launching their attack with the low cunning few would expect of such barbarous creatures. Lastly, the Inquisition warned the Cadian High Command to be alert for seemingly incongruous reports of alien infiltration in the region near the Subiaco Diablo system, particularly for attacks coming up from below the galactic plane. They will not expound further on what they meant by this, but insisted that the Cadian High Command should inform the Inquisition immediately should any such attacks by unknown Xenos materialize. Despite being beset on all sides, the Imperial forces and their commanders remained imbued with a sense of righteous indignity. If every damned creature in the galaxy was now ranged against it, then they were determined to take them all into oblivion with the last cry of the human race.